Morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. Breaking news out of the US this morning. Multiple fatalities at a shooting at a supermarket in Virginia. We're hearing that the shooter has died and several people have been killed. We're live in the US very shortly. Meantime, here in the UK, Man United's American owners could be on the way out. We're live at Old Trafford and a big court decision this morning on whether a second Scottish independence referendum can take place without Westminster's approval. Also on the programme, the Work and Pension Secretary Mel Stride and the leader of the RMT Union, Mick Lynch. It's Wednesday, the 23rd of November. Manchester United's American owners confirmed they could sell the club after a controversial 17-year reign.
Judgment Day. The Supreme Court will decide if a second Scottish independence referendum can take place without the approval of Westminster.
Police in the United States say there have been multiple fatalities in shootings at a Walmart store in Virginia. These are the latest pictures reaching us.
Here in Qatar, concern for Harry Kane. England captain's due to have a scan on his ankle ahead of England's next match against the United States on Friday.
More rail misery with fresh strikes planned for the peak Christmas travel period. Speaking to the RMT Union leader Mick Lynch. Will the real Liz Truss please stand up? Who is the real Liz Truss? Speaking to the authors of a new book charting the rise and fall of Britain's shortest-serving Prime Minister. Plus,
come fly with me, let's fly away.
planning on flying away? We'll tell you which UK airport has the worst security queues. All of that to come, but we start with breaking news on the programme this morning out of the United States. Police say several people have died in a shooting at a Walmart store in Virginia. There have already been 600 mass shootings in America so far this year. Our US correspondent Martha Kellner is with us. Hi, Martha, what more do we know? Good morning.
Morning, Kay. Well, this is another day, another mass shooting in America. This time it's going to be the city of Chesapeake in Virginia on America's East Coast, which will wake up tomorrow morning to learn of the horrific bloodshed at a Walmart supermarket. We still don't know the exact number of fatalities, but we do know that there have been multiple deaths and multiple injuries inside that Walmart supermarket that you can see there. In the last hour or so, the local Chesapeake police have been giving a press conference. The spokesman there said that they received a call around 10:10 in the evening to tell them of reports of a shooting at that supermarket. Police officers then entered the store. He said that over the course of 35 to 40 minutes, officers found multiple dead people and injured people in the store. He said they put rescue and tactical teams together to go inside and provide life-saving measures. He also said, Mr. Kaczynski, the spokesman, that officers were still searching for victims more than 2 hours after they arrived on the scene. He noted that it was a large store which had lots of hiding spots for shoppers who had possibly sought cover during the shooting. People could get scared, he said. We want to make sure that everyone is accounted for. I think it's important at this juncture to reflect on the astonishing and horrific level of gun violence in America. I'm sure people will have heard over the weekend of the shooting on Saturday night at an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs in Colorado. 5 people were killed in that incident and 17 wounded. Since then, there have been 5 more mass shootings defined as incidents where 4 or more people are injured or killed, not including the shooter. In addition, this is the 607th mass shooting in America this year. Clearly, obviously, still some time to go as well. Gun violence is steadily increasing in America year on year. And whatever emerges from this event, and I'm sure in the coming hours and days we'll hear more about the motive of the shooter involved. We do know that the shooter was killed as well in this incident. Whatever emerges, we need to reflect, or America has to reflect once again, on what is a uniquely American problem, this astonishing level of gun violence and perhaps the laws that maybe allow this sort of thing to happen on such a regular basis here.
Yeah, so just to recap for us then, if you would please, Martha, multiple deaths we're hearing at the moment. The gunman has also been killed. We haven't got exact numbers, as you said, yet, though.
We haven't got exact numbers. The police officer who was delivering that press conference was asked whether it was more than 10. He said he didn't believe there had been 10 fatalities, but he did say that they found multiple people injured, including someone who appears to have been killed close to the entrance of that store. There's clearly a lot of conjecture at the moment about the motives of the gunman, whether this was a disgruntled employee, perhaps a disgruntled customer, or whether this was just simply a random event, a random store picked out. But it's a couple of days away from the Thanksgiving holidays at the moment, so clearly 10 p.m. at night is not a time when that shop would be as busy as at other periods during the day. But this is an incredibly busy holiday period, as they call it here, just 2 days away from the Thanksgiving holiday. So there will have been a fair number of people, you would imagine, inside that store, even though it was around 45 minutes from closing time. So I think we'll hear more, I think, from a press conference from the Chesapeake Police Department in the coming hours, but clearly police still on the scene there. And as until very recently, they were still searching around that very large supermarket, looking for people who perhaps had been trying to find a hiding place to escape the violence that was unfolding inside.
OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. So we are waiting to hear more information from the police in the area, but what we are hearing from looking at those latest pictures, up to 10 people are dead after a shooting at a Walmart. Let's have a look at those pictures again, should we? Let's have a look at those pictures again, should we? A Walmart shooting. Up to 10 people have been killed. We believe that the gunman is also amongst the dead. This is at Chesapeake in Virginia on the east coast of the United States. This story developing in the last half an hour or so. US police saying the gunman is dead. Several shoppers inside that store around about 10 o'clock at night also having lost their lives as a result of this shooting. We'll get more information, and as soon as we do, of course, we'll bring it to you here on Sky News. Manchester United's American owners have confirmed they could sell the club. It comes after Sky News exclusively revealed the Glazer family was preparing to announce the news and were already being advised by bankers. Fans of Manchester United have long campaigned against the club's American owners, who they accuse of a lack of investment and saddling the club with too much debt. One man definitely leaving is Cristiano Ronaldo, whose time at Old Trafford has ended. Mark Kleiman reports. Do we have Mark Kleiman's report? OK, we've got Mark instead. Hi, Mark. Good morning to you. Tell us more about your exclusive.
Morning, Kay. Yeah, that's right, Kay. I mean, this is 17 years of controversy under the Glazers' ownership of Manchester United, which may be finally coming to an end. As you say, a period that's been marred by protests and declining performance on the pitch. Manchester United have not won the Premier League title for 10 years nearly, and are trophyless for the last 5 years. What's interesting about this announcement last night in the wake of my story is that it's the first time that the Glazers have openly acknowledged that they would be prepared to seek fresh investment into the club. And importantly, in their statement to the New York Stock Exchange late last night, the board of the club confirmed that they are open to an outright sale. Now, the attention is inevitably going to turn, Kay, to who exactly might step up with the multi-billion-pound cheque that would be required to end the Glazers' ownership. There's going to be a lot of speculation in the coming months, and as I revealed in this report last night, the period of the Glazers' ownership will be coming to an end. Will be welcomed by fans from around the world.
Lucrative, troubled and turbulent. Is the Glazer family's tenure at Manchester United nearing the final whistle? Almost 20 years after taking control of arguably the world's most famous football club, the Old Trafford outfit has confirmed an exclusive Sky News report that its owners are exploring a sale. The Glazers have been controversial figures throughout their time at United, and the lack of a Premier League title since 2013 has only intensified fans' antipathy.
It is 17 years where the club was laden with a lot of debt, which has not been paid down. The levels of debt are the same today as they were in 2005. And that's led to a lack of investment, both in the playing side, and we see that on the pitch, but also in the stadium, the state of Old Trafford. That used to be, one of our great sources of pride, and it isn't anymore.
We won't place out, we won't place out.
United's involvement with the ill-fated European Super League provided one of many flashpoints. And it may be the failure of that project which has finally persuaded the owners to sell.
Absolutely without question, the last 10 years of the stewardship has been not far short of disastrous. It's the business model they've established. It is incorrect and wrong. They pay themselves dividends. It's the only Premier League club where directors pay themselves dividends. The time is right to sell.
The Glazers' debt-fuelled takeover 17 years ago preceded a boom in the valuations of England's top football clubs. The American family paid £790 million. Earlier this year, Chelsea changed hands for £2.5 billion. Liverpool is now reportedly up for sale with a price.
Now, Kay, as I was saying there in my report, there will be a lot of interest in buying Manchester United. But what's interesting is that, of course, with Liverpool also potentially for sale, this may be seen by many investors as representing the high watermark for the valuations of English Premier League clubs, particularly in the wake of the failure of that European Super League project a couple of years ago. Now, it's important to note that any new owner would come in that would need the blessing of the fans. There is a new fan share ownership scheme being put together at Old Trafford at the moment, and even former players were wading into the debate last night.
I think the fireworks will be going off. I think there'll be a party. I think everybody will be absolutely delighted that this is going to go ahead. If it goes ahead, I mean, it looks certainly a very serious option for them now. So let's keep our fingers crossed and let's make the fans happy, and let's rebuild the club as well as the team.
Okay, this isn't going to be a quick sale process. I would expect it to take several months. It's going to be a very, very fraught process. But I would think that by the end of this current season, we will see new owners in place at Manchester United.
OK, thank you. The Supreme Court will rule today on whether the Scottish Parliament has the power to call for a second independence referendum without the approval of Westminster. There are multiple possible outcomes of today's ruling. If the Scottish Government wins, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon will likely table the draft referendum bill at the Scottish Parliament, where it would likely pass because of the deal between the SNP and the Scottish Greens. If the court sides with the UK government, consent is needed from Westminster to rerun a referendum. Another possible outcome is the court deciding it's unable to rule on a Holyrood-created referendum because the planned legislation is still in draft form, or the court could decide to answer the question while also accepting that the Lord Advocate, who's the senior Scottish law officer, did not have the powers to refer the draft bill to the court in the first place. Well, our Scotland correspondent Connor has been in Five to find out how voters feel about the prospect of a fresh poll.
Fife voted no to independence 8 years ago, but has this place changed its tune as the deadlock on Scotland's future intensifies? Pondering that over a pub lunch, friends Jim and Paul.
Well, in 2014 I voted no, but the way the country's gone, I feel we'd probably be better going our own way.
I think the best way forward is to get independence, and then we can vote for the party we want once we've got that.
Do you regret voting no in 2014?
Yes, I do.
If there was to be a vote tomorrow, what way do you think it would go?
The no vote would win. We're better together. I want the world to get smaller, not bigger.
Unlike in 2014, when there was agreement from both sides, Prime Ministers in recent years have said politicians in this place, Holyrood, cannot legally hold another referendum, as the powers to do so are reserved to Westminster, something judges at the Supreme Court are set to rule on. There are various ways this could go. The Scottish Government could win, and activists say that would essentially fire the starting gun on the campaign for a referendum in October next year. The Scottish Government would be able to table its independence referendum bill, and it's likely to get the green light because the majority of MSPs are independent supporting. The other alternative is that the UK Government's argument wins, that Holyrood cannot legislate for an independence referendum. Nicola Sturgeon says in that scenario, she would use the next general election as a de facto referendum.
Well, there is this point that the First Minister has said that the 2024 UK general election be a de facto referendum on independence, and by implication, were her party and its nationalist allies to get more than 50% of the vote, they would see that as a mandate to seek independence negotiations. But again, that's simply, first of all, if that's a very high hurdle. Secondly, that's a political debating point rather than anything of standing in law.
The stage is set once again for this latest crescendo in a constitutional conversation, which has Scotland split straight down the middle. Conor Gillis, Sky News.
Joe's at the Supreme Court for us this morning. Hi, Joe. 4 possible options that they can return.
Yeah, and there is a debate over whether there could even be more than that, Kay. It depends really on who you ask, and neither side has any early indication or early sight of that judgment. They'll find out, the UK government and Scottish government, as we all will, at 9:45 today. This is really one of those crossroads moments which could determine the future constitutional direction of the UK. Certainly what the UK government seem reasonably confident in is that this attempt by the Scottish government will fail in some way. Quite sort of details of the ruling is of course unclear, but they think and are confident that they can win. And there are senior figures I've spoken to within the Scottish government who concede the weight of legal opinion is probably against them. That doesn't mean, though, even if the Scottish government lose in some way, they can't use this to build support further for Scottish independence. Lord Reid, who's the president of the Supreme Court, will be delivering that judgment at 9:45. It should last between 10 to 15 minutes, and then the rest of the day I'm sure we'll have responses from the UK and Scottish government. Certainly Rishi Sunak is prepped to respond at PMQs at 12.
Very much indeed, and we'll bring you the Supreme Court ruling live here on Sky News, as Joe was saying, around about 9:45 this morning. As Joe was saying, likely to last between 10 and 15 minutes. Could there be another referendum in Scotland? Stay tuned and find out. Meantime, there are concerns surrounding Harry Kane at the World Cup, with the England captain set to have a scan on his right ankle ahead of Friday's match against the United States. Let's get more, should we? Ali standing by for us in Doha this morning. Everybody here in the UK, certainly in England, holding their breath. What's the latest, Alistair?
Yeah, I bet they are. England fans here too. Harry Kane, we understand, is going to go and have a scan on his ankle. He limped off. It seemed as though he was injured pretty early on in the second half when England played Iran here on Monday. The music coming out of the England camp might suggest that this is slightly precautionary. We'll wait and see what happens at the press conference later on this afternoon. We'll have a team there, so we'll get an update on it. But of course, Harry Kane, not just England's captain, but leading goal scorer as well, and so everyone will be keeping their fingers crossed that his ankle is okay. He's not the only injury worry. James Maddison hasn't been training really at all since England arrived here in Qatar. He's another informed forward as well. Callum Wilson and Harry Maguire, who both played part in England's victory over Iran, both have sort of small niggling injury worries, but I don't think anything too much to be concerned about. So really the focus is on Harry Kane, is on the England captain, and the hope that when that scans and is done and the results come back, it's not too serious.
OK, thank you. Looking at some of today's other headlines for you now, and the RMT has announced a fresh wave of rail strikes over the festive period. Around 40,000 staff from Network Rail and 14 train companies are set to strike on the 13th, 14th, 16th and 17th of December and the 4th, 6th and 7th of January. A parliamentary watchdog has ruled that Matt Hancock broke government rules by not seeking permission before appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. The former Health Secretary, who has already been stripped of the Tory whip for his reality TV appearance, failed to consult the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments before joining the programme. A Just Stop Oil activist who glued herself to a Van Gogh painting has told a court the artist may have agreed with the demonstration and went on to compare the actions to Martin Luther King. Activists Louis McKenzie and Emily Brocklebank were found guilty of causing just under £2,000 worth of criminal damage to the frame of the artwork. As COVID-19 cases rise in China, the country's zero-tolerance strategy stands firm, with Beijing introducing new restrictions to curb infections. Here, people will have to provide proof of a negative test 48 hours before entering public areas like restaurants, office buildings and shopping centres. This comes after the ruling Communist Party promised to make controls more flexible to appease an increasingly restless population. OK, let's just update you on the latest on a shooting at a Walmart in Chesapeake in Virginia, which is on the US East Coast. Police are saying up to 10 people have been killed, including the gunman. Reports of a shooting at 10:15 local time, 10:15 p.m. We're told that multiple dead people, reports from officers on the ground, injured as well in the store, and rescue and tactical teams have been put together to go inside and provide life-saving measures. Police believe there was one gunman who is dead, as I said. They believe that the shooting had stopped when the police arrived.
And long story short, over the course of the next 30, 45 minutes, we were able to find multiple fatalities and multiple injured parties. With the Chesapeake Fire Department, we were able to put rescue and tactical teams together to go inside to provide life-saving measures rapidly and quickly. And then through the course of the investigation, we believe was a single shooter, and we believe that shooter is deceased at this time.
I will get more on that and update you as soon as we can. But the latest we are hearing is that several people are dead, including a gunman, after a shooting, a late-night shooting at a Walmart in Chesapeake in Virginia on the east coast of the United States. Well, as the Supreme Court prepares to rule on whether the Scottish Parliament can hold an independence referendum without Westminster's approval, speaking to the former First Minister, that's Henry McLeish, Labour's Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, will be with us soon after 8 o'clock. And following the announcement of a fresh wave of rail strikes over the busy Christmas period, speaking to the boss of the RMT union, that's Nick Lynch. For all of that, though, let's bring in the Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel, who's with us this morning. Hi, you want to tell us about 600 quid that's being given to pensioners. How much of a dent is that going to make on their household energy bills?
Well, it comes within a broader package of support for the most vulnerable. And I think this has been a core mission of this government, has to make sure we support people as best we can if they are vulnerable or less well off. So there's £650, which has gone to 8 million low-income households. £300 going out with the winter fuel payments. That's up to £600 for millions of pensioners. 1 million pensioners today will actually receive that amount. £150 if you're disabled, £400 off energy bills, and of course the energy price guarantee, which means that people are saving on average £900 this year on their energy costs. So a huge package, of which pensions are a very important part of it. And bear in mind, Kay, in the autumn statement, The Chancellor announced that the triple lock will be honoured going forward, and we've also uprated pensions by CPI by 10.1%.
And yet civil servants, so we're hearing this morning, still have to use food banks.
So clearly anybody in a position where they need to use a food bank is not right, and is something that through time one would hope that we will get to a point where nobody needs to use a food bank. What the government recognises is that, as with other countries around the world, we've been really hit very hard by first the pandemic, and then, of course, by the war between Ukraine and Russia, and the impact that that's had, not just on energy, actually, but on foodstuffs and other products as well, which has created a lot of inflation. So given that backdrop, we can't do everything, but we are doing the absolute maximum that we can, whilst getting inflation down and getting the economy righted so we can get growth and prosperity moving into the future.
And yet people go to the doctor, they're poorly, they should be signed off sick, they won't take a sick note because they have to go to work, otherwise they won't get paid. And our Prime Minister is spending 250 quid to be able to see a private GP at the drop of a hat. You understand the disparity there?
Well, I think as regards the Prime Minister's personal medical arrangements, I do think they're a matter for the Prime Minister. But as I say, what the government is absolutely intent on doing, and is doing, is making sure that wherever we can, we are helping the most vulnerable in society. So outside of those direct payments that I mentioned, we've also just put up the national living wage by almost 10%, the highest increase in the history of the national living wage. We've already previously made adjustments, for example, to the universal credit taper, so that people keep more of the money as they move from universal credit into work. We are providing all sorts of supports at all sorts of levels, but very much aimed at just the people you're referring to, those who need the help the most.
So you don't think it's any of our business that the Prime Minister can jump a queue if he needs to go and see the doctor, whereas other people have to wait a fortnight?
Well, as I say, I think people's personal medical arrangements are things that if they choose to make public, that's fine.
Well, he does.
But I think
that was his campaign based on the NHS, wasn't it?
Well, and we're totally dedicated to the NHS. Judge him by his actions and the Health Secretary's actions on the NHS.
But he's not using the NHS, he's going privately because he knows
in that very difficult,
that he'd be able to see him very quickly.
In that very difficult autumn statement, which had a lot of very hard choices that had to be made, two things really stood out. One was an increased commitment to funding education, but the other was the health service and social care, which actually got quite a lot of money in the near term. So the commitment that we have to the NHS is absolutely central to this government, and that is something that's very much driven from the top by the Prime Minister.
OK, so it's none of our business, you're saying, whether the Prime Minister uses private healthcare.
Well, I'm just saying I think we should respect people's,
OK, let me ask
the fact that they should be able to keep private things like their medical arrangements.
Do you think that people who can afford it should pay to see a GP privately so that other people don't have to wait a fortnight?
I don't think that we should have a situation regarding the NHS that in any way interferes with the fundamental concept of the NHS, which is based on need, not ability to pay.
If people can afford to pay, though, given the situation that we found ourselves in at the moment, should they take the lead of the Prime Minister and go privately?
People's decisions on that are for people to make individually. But as I say, I think that the principle here is that arrangements like that are quite rightly private to those individuals that choose to take those decisions. I don't think people should have to publicly declare exactly what their medical arrangements are.
Even if they're a public servant?
Yeah, I do. I think that there's a principle here. I mean, I understand the sort of line of questioning that you're pursuing, but I think it's...
What do you think people will be thinking at home this morning when they've rung the doctors and they're being told their child is unwell, but they have to wait for a fortnight to see? And then the guy who's representing them, who wants their vote at the next election, can pay 250 quid and hop in his chauffeur-driven car and go to the doctors?
Well, what I'm saying very clearly is that when it comes to the NHS, that is an absolute #1 priority for the government. Judge the Prime Minister, judge the government by our actions on that. In the recent autumn statement, huge, tough choices had to be made, both on spending and on taxation. But the one area that got extra support, really serious, £8 billion worth of extra support for social care, for example, was the National Health Service. So we are absolutely clear on this. We are totally committed to our NHS. We are totally committed to it being free at the point of use, and that it's available for everybody on an equal basis with no queue jumping or anything like that. Money will not buy you preferential treatment on the NHS. It
No,
will be
it will
there free at
otherwise,
the
though.
point of use,
Yeah.
based on need.
What are we going to do about the rail strikes?
So I think what's regrettable is that the trade unions have come forward with a series of dates of strikes now, clearly aimed at causing maximum disruption across the
That's what strikes are for.
Christmas period. But before you reach the point of strikes, you should really exhaust all the other avenues, because strikes are very serious. They impact not just general journeys, but sometimes people, to get back to the medical points that you're raising, who actually need that transport to get to important medical appointments, for example. So what we need is more engagement and discussion between those businesses that are running the railways and Network Rail and the trade unions in order to come to a balanced, realistic outcome. And what I mean by that is it has to be fair to taxpayers who are funding the railways and put a lot of money into the railways during the pandemic, not least to support the jobs of those working within those railways. But it has to also be fair to passengers when it comes to the fares that they're expected to pay, and it has to work with the public finances. But I think the unions need to engage further on this, and we need to not rush into these strikes at a time that's really designed to cause maximum discomfort to the public.
What are you going to do about the Transport Services Bill? Why don't you bring that forward? So I'm sure you could get it through the House very quickly if you decided to. As a result, there would be a minimum service that would be provided.
Yes.
Why is that taking so long if you're so...
Well, legislation takes a little while. I think sometimes... I say this as a former leader of the House. I used to be responsible for managing legislation going through.
You get legislation
yes,
through pretty
indeed.
quickly,
And the government has a commitment in that area and to minimum service provision, and in due course I've no doubt that will come forward. And I do think it's important, because I think we shouldn't be left in a position in certain services such as railways where we have such an acute dependence upon them for a variety of reasons.
But there's no plans to bring that
where
forward.
The whole thing can just be, the plug can be pulled on the whole thing.
But
I think
no
we
plan
need
to bring it forward. I mean, it
well, there will, in due course, as I say, it is something that the government will be looking at.
Talk to me about a lot of, including former Work and Pension Secretary Chloe Smith. I'm looking at William Ragg, and both quite young MPs, and yet they're saying that they're not going to stand at the next election for your party. What's going on?
Well, at every general election, there are a number of people who step aside. I think in Chloe's case, I think it's for family reasons. She has young children, and she's taken that decision, and I totally respect that. I think what has triggered it in the immediate term is that the party has required MPs to basically take a decision within the next couple of weeks as to whether they stand or not. So I think you're going to see a lot of those decisions crystallising in a very short period of time.
You're right that a lot of MPs do tend to step down. Something like 5% of the House will step down during every election, but not youngsters like these two.
Well, I don't think, that with respect to Chloe and others, that they're the only younger people that have decided not to fight a forthcoming election. But I think the most important thing...
That doesn't add any weight to your argument.
Well, my argument is that people stand down, and some of those will be younger and some of those will be older, and you've cited two examples of relatively younger people. But the important thing... Yeah, well, certainly compared to me. I went into Parliament at age 47.
Well, there we go.
So that was the way I did it. But,
And talk to me about what's going on with this housing rebellion. There was supposed to be a vote on getting 300,000 houses built a year, and quite a few of your colleagues are saying we don't agree with that for all sorts of reasons. Your boss is worried about losing the vote, and so he's kicked it into the long grass.
OK, well, I don't know that any announcement has been made about rescheduling of legislation. The Leader of the House will come to the House tomorrow as part of their business statement.
So it may still go ahead as planned?
Tell us more about that. Yeah, the answer is I don't know. We'll have to wait and see till the Leader of the House comes forward tomorrow. Yeah.
So what I'm reading in the papers is wrong on that?
Well, the papers are sometimes right, Kay, and sometimes they are wrong. But
yeah,
we'll get the answer to that essay question tomorrow.
On this looks like a sieve. Will you use taxpayers' money to have a Christmas party this year? Definitely not.
Definitely not.
OK.
And I think
what would you say to other MPs who are thinking of doing?
Well, it's for them to decide. But look, let's be clear about what's happened here. OK, the general view I think out there is that MPs have somehow designed things so that they're able to charge the taxpayer for Christmas parties and decorations and drinks and things like that. That could not be further from the truth. IPSA, which is an independent body, has taken that decision. It certainly wasn't
Doesn't
taken
mean they
at
have to
my
take the
behest.
money, yeah.
Yes. So it then becomes a case of then do individual MPs.
So what would you say to individual MPs?
Well, my decision, I try to avoid lecturing other MPs as to what they should do. I mean, in certain circumstances, I certainly would do that. But I think on this, everybody has to take their own judgment. My firm view is that in my case, I will not be doing that. I don't think it sends the right signal. I don't actually think that IPSA's decision is the right one. And I know that a number of my colleagues share that view and are quite... quite upset about the fact, actually, that IPSA has put all MPs in a position where the public is saying, well, you're all up to spending our hard-earned money on your Christmas celebrations, and that's not right. I suspect the vast majority of MPs would agree with that, but we've been put in that position by IPSA. What decision will have you celebrating at the Supreme Court today? What do you want to hear? Well, I think what we want to hear is just the results of their conclusions, which will be at 9:45 this morning. I don't think it would be right for me to start prejudging that or saying, well, if it's this, I think this, or if it's that, I think something differently. I think we have to wait to see what they come forward with. Really? Yeah, I do. I think it's a big moment. There's been, the government put its case, I think, last month with vigour. Other arguments have been put forward. We now need to give the judges just a little bit of extra space to come forward later this morning, and then let's talk about what they've decided. OK, what do you think of the football? This is the sale of Ronaldo, is it? Manchester United. Manchester United, yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day... You can talk about England if you prefer. Well, I think these are commercial decisions. I don't personally think it's for government to weigh in on too frequent a basis. So you're pretty relaxed if the Saudis buy it? Well, as I say... Something else you want to talk to me about this morning? Yeah, no, I just don't... I don't think that, we're always urged as governments to get involved in all sorts of areas of sport, and I think that's just one which I might resist. OK. But you did watch the England game? I did, and I thought we were terrific, and it was a great result. And Harry Kane needs a scan. Fingers crossed. Sorry, Harry Kane needs a scan on his ankle. Right. Well, that's a fly in the ointment, as they say. But who knows? I've just got a good feeling about England this time, and Wales, of course, too, who did very well. Let's not forget that. OK, it's great to see you as always. Thanks so much indeed, Mr. Stride. Thank you. Let's talk about IndyRef, actually, in a bit more detail, should we? The former First Minister of Scotland, Henry McLeish, is with us now. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. The Minister wouldn't be drawn on what he wanted to hear from the Supreme Court today. What about you?
Well, I think, Kay, you certainly gave him an exhausting number of questions to answer. But look, this is important. But I believe that we've reached a point in the history of devolution where we've got to step back. Clearly, the Supreme Court is looking at the question of could Scotland move forward, have its independence referendum. But I would rather concentrate on whether Scotland should actually have a referendum. I suspect that there's three possible outcomes. One is that Scotland has the power to proceed with the legislation. Secondly, it is reserved to Westminster as per the Scotland Act 1998. Or thirdly, the court may decide that this is all very premature and they will wait until the actual legislation goes through the Scottish Parliament. So that is one side of it. That's the legal side. But I think the politics of it are much more complex. My belief is that we shouldn't be having a referendum now, next year, or even within the next 5 years. There are so many important issues to be dealing with. And sadly, the SNP have exhausted the political energy in relation to independence, that they're not applying themselves to the kind of big issues that are facing not only the United Kingdom, but to Scotland. And my main thesis is that we need to give devolution a chance to work. That would be looking at the long view, not the short term. And I think that the point has to be made, Kay, that in 1707, we had a manufactured union. In 1997, we started on the devolution road. This is 2022. And I believe there's much more potential in the Scottish Parliament to be realised before we think of moving on.
You were very much involved, I think I'm right in saying, in Tony Blair's government in order to set up devolution or to enable devolution in the first place. Is devolution working so far as you would have hoped?
No, it's not, Kay. And I think that really is the source of my concern. I mean, we have 25 years now of the Scottish Parliament. It's done some remarkable work, but it's not realising its potential. That's partly because since 2007, really, we've had a campaign for independence, but we've had really no debate on where Scotland is actually moving. And if you look at the current situation, like the UK, we're experiencing multiple crises. Scottish public opinion is bitterly divided. There is no settled will. Of course, we have a situation where the momentum for independence has disappeared. And of course, we have a situation which worries me, that Scotland is stalled. We're not applying ourselves to the real issues that we're facing. And that's why I believe we come back to devolution. We've had 25 years. It seems a long time, but in the history of the UK Union, it's a short period. I would like to think we concentrate on some of the bigger issues. We concentrate on some of the policy issues that I think are being neglected. And as far as I'm concerned, the mood, the mind of Scots are not on this question of having a referendum. Look, nobody has a crystal ball. It may well be the case in 20, 25 years' time, maybe earlier, that Scots will decide they want devo max, they want home rule, they want more devolution, they want more independence. But my judgment is this is not the time to be taking these big political and constitutional decisions. It's a time for making devolution work and for the independence campaign to be sidelined so that Scots can concentrate on issues that matter to Scots.
Yeah, but that's democracy for you, Mr McLeish, isn't it? You're not in power anymore. The SNP very much is, and they want a referendum. They say that's what the Scottish people want.
Well, I'm not sure that's that clearly comes from the points you've made, Kay, because look, we have a situation where the country's divided down the middle. 50-50 to be generous. It could be 60-40 in favour of staying in the Union. Look, I think the Union is partly the catalyst for all this unrest. If you look at the contempt, the look at Ireland, the contempt with which they're looking at the Irish protocol with Northern Ireland, Wales they treat with contempt. We have a situation in England where there's restlessness in some of the metropolitan areas. And of course, under Johnson, we had this idea of brutal unionism. So part of my vision is to see that Scotland concentrates now on the issues that matter, but Westminster's got to take a think to itself. It can't continue the way it's going because it's centralised governing of the United Kingdom is perilous for the four nations that make it up. But I think also, Kay, we've got to realise that when we talk about democracy, very few Scots are actually in favour of a second independence referendum now. We have a situation where the country is divided. And of course, there's the famous Abraham Lincoln comment that, a house divided cannot stand. So we've got much to do in Scotland, which has nothing to do with independence. But what we have got to do is to deal with some of these important issues. You're right. I'm not in power. I'm not in politics. But I do think that after looking at the issue for 25 years, being on the floor of the House, taking the legislation through, devolution has got to work better. The Parliament has huge potential. And it's important that not only the Union sees itself not fit for purpose, but the Scottish traditional parties, Liberals, Labour, Conservatives, actually now apply more enthusiasm to the Scottish Parliament and build a way forward. Let's nation build. Let's institutional reform. Let's do a number of things that will make Scotland better. That will give us a chance in the long term to say, OK, is there a next step for Scotland? And at that point, some action may be taken. But clearly, this is not the right time now to move forward in the way that the SNP want to do.
It's great to talk to you again. Thanks so much for taking the time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Tamara is with us to reflect on what we've heard from the government minister this morning, talking to us about the next tranche of money that's being given to pensioners, but not wanting to talk about Rishi Sunak's private medicine.
That's right. This story that appeared in The Guardian about Rishi Sunak using a private GP. And there's a question for politicians about whether they use the same services as the rest of us, whether it's the NHS or state schools. I remember David Cameron made great play of sending his children to state schools, indeed, and whether that makes them in touch with the rest of us. And of course, Conservative ministers are lining up to say what matters is what he's doing for the NHS. And in the autumn statement, there was a surprise bung of money to the NHS, £6.6 billion over 2 years, which NHS leaders say is not enough, but is something. There was also money for schools in there, so they say judge him on his record. But of course, the difficulty is that many public services are facing a very difficult time over the next few months. And of course, he didn't say people should you go private if they can, in order to take the pressure off, because that's not the official message.
No, and also when we talked about strikes, there's no plan to bring forward the bill to stop unions striking to the extent that they are now.
So the bill that would ensure a minimum service on the railways is going through Parliament. It's started, it's making progress. These things take a while, but even during these strikes that Mick Lynch of the RMT has announced, 8 days of strikes over Christmas, not the present anyone wanted, they are going to be having some trains running. I think it's about 1 in 5 trains will be running on those days, but of course masses of disruption for people visiting family or going to events that they've booked over the festive period. Can the government agree something? I mean, there are reports in the papers today, unconfirmed, that the RMT have been offered an 8% rise over 2 years, but it isn't just about pay, it's also about jobs and conditions, and whether they can keep hold of all of those jobs during what has been a massively financially damaging period for the railways.
OK, thanks very much indeed, Tamara. Tomorrow's Take, of course, at 9 o'clock this morning. Quick look at the papers for you. Lots of them are picking up on the announcement of a fresh wave of strikes. Speaking to Mick Lynch, or as you can see, the way the Metro are describing him as Mick Grinch. We'll have another look through the papers a bit later on, but do want to bring in Serena, who is a sixth form student, and she is 18. Hello to you. It's nice to see you. You look great this morning. Thanks for coming in. Talk to me about mental health challenges, because that's the topic that we want to talk about, young people struggling during the pandemic. Tell me about your story.
So I struggled with social anxiety following the pandemic.
Sure.
Because everybody was at home during quarantine and you were stuck seeing the same people constantly, my routine became repetitive. I became comfortable with that. But once quarantine was over and I had to go talk to strangers and get back to regular life, I felt really stressed being put in those type of situations, and it really affected my mental health.
So what have you done about it?
I reached out online to help. So I did a bit of research about social anxiety. I read some books. I talked to friends. I talked to teachers, and they really walked me through it, and I've gotten much better.
OK, so what would your advice be to young people getting ready for school this morning who might find themselves in the same position as you?
Talk to friends, talk to teachers. People are here to help you. You shouldn't be scared to reach out. Everybody wants the best for you, so reach out. Reach out to anybody who's willing to listen.
Do you have any top tips that you can share with us when it comes to dealing with, stressful situations?
People don't care enough to judge you, so don't worry too much about people's opinions. People have their own insecurities, their own stresses, so their opinions of you won't affect you. So you should just go on with life and not let your insecurities affect your life.
And are there any physical things that you do sort of to walk into a room that you're anxious about because, you've been used to just being on your own and now you're having to go in and talk to people on television and the like?
Take a few deep breaths, really centre yourself and just go in head first.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I find that if I pat my chest like this and then apparently it's supposed to remind you of when you were in the womb, and it's sort of like the heartbeat of when you were in the womb. So that, I find that really helps. I don't know if you want to try that at some stage in the future. You don't have to do it right now. How are you getting on with your A-levels?
It's going quite good.
Yeah, what are you studying?
Biology, philosophy and ethics and psychology.
Oh, fantastic. And what do you want to do when you leave university? Are you going to university? I mean,
yeah.
Of course you don't have to, but...
I hope to become a solicitor.
Oh, you're going to be properly clever, aren't you? Fantastic. And you feel completely happy now, and you can deal with any situation or scenario?
I wouldn't say completely, but I'm getting there.
OK. And there are opportunities online for people if they want to reach out, but I'm guessing you just need to be quite careful about some social media sites. You don't want to be going down that rabbit hole, do you?
Yeah, you need to be quite careful about where you reach out. So you just need to make sure you do your research and you're safe online.
OK. Going to school now?
Yeah.
Good. What's your first lesson?
Philosophy and ethics.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Excellent, excellent. Have a great day. Enjoy the Christmas period and keep doing what you're doing. It's great to see you. Look forward to interviewing you when you're a lawyer. Bear with me just 1 second, if you would, because someone will come and help you out of the studio. Thank you. Let's take you to Ukraine now, where people have been promised shelters will be created with heat and water to encourage citizens to conserve energy with a harsh winter looming amid continuing Russian airstrikes. Joining us now is the Ukrainian MP, Kira Rudik. Hi, Kira, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. How is the situation amongst your fellow citizens this morning?
Hello, Kay. Thank you so much for having me. Well, the winter is here. The snow is on the ground in Kiev, and of course, people are worried on how they're going to go through the winter. People are saving on electricity, buying generators, buying different kinds of heaters, and getting ready to the energy outages. So basically, we are having them every single day, but in different parts of the city and different parts of the country on different times. It's a very good idea to have the shelters and to have these stations for people to charge their phones, to come and just get some warmth and have a cup of tea and have a little break in their day when they have to be outside and have and feel the support of each other. Because the main thing that we feel right now is that we can only go through this winter together, that we will need to take care not only of ourselves, but of the people around us, and that the responsibility is to get every single Ukrainian through the winter.
Yeah, but there is huge concern about energy supply and that affects heating, lighting, water as well. And so these bunkers, if you will, I suppose, are being set up for Ukrainian citizens to go and spend some time. I suppose that's taking them back to the early days of the war again. What impact is that going to have on morale?
Surprisingly, morale right now is very high. So people are taking the upcoming winter as a challenge, a complicated challenge, but not as a tragedy. So we anticipated that there would be another flow of refugees to the neighboring countries like Poland. But right now, we do not see this happening. We see that people are staying at home and people are getting ready to go through the winter at home. I can tell you right now, people are supporting each other in a tremendous way, helping the cities to set up those shelters and helping to prepare to the winter, not only themselves, but their neighbors, but elderly people who cannot support themselves, taking on more and more responsibility to basically to stay alive, to go through the winter, and to make sure that we will be capable of fighting in spring as well.
And just talk to me about something that the European Parliament is up to. They're calling to recognise Wagner Group as a terrorist organisation. It's, as we know, certainly a private mercenary militia led by one of Putin's allies. What's your view on that?
Of course, it will be a good step to make because they are a terrorist organization. If they will be recognized by European Parliament, it will stop this organization from working in different African countries and will limit their influence because this influence is growing. These are basically trained military who are fighting for the ones who are paying them, and they are supporting many conflicts throughout the world. So it is necessary to stop them and to limit their growth right now. However, what we are expecting more is for European Parliament to vote for acknowledging Russia state sponsor of terrorism, because it will enact additional sets of sanctions from different national parliaments, and also it will allow us to faster seize Russian assets and use them for the sake of Ukraine. I think it's completely unfair that the burden on supporting of Ukraine is going on to people who are actually supporting us. I think Putin needs to pay for his own crimes. There is enough money stored everywhere in the world to cover for the support that we are receiving. It's about $500 billion right now, and we need to use this money, and we need to use them as soon as possible until Putin pulls them and or oligarchs will start suing to get them back. So this is one of the important cases that we are working on to get the support for the country.
OK, thanks very much indeed for joining us, as always, live from Kiev. Thank you. Quick look at the weather for you.
Anticipation is rising, and so is the atmosphere. Are you ready? The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
OK, this is what it's looking like today. Lots of rain, as you can see, continuing to move eastwards across the country.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Planning to head overseas, which has found that Leeds Bradford Airport is the worst in the country for security queues. Passengers wait for an average of 35 minutes, while a quarter of passengers said they waited for more than an hour. Bristol is ranked second worst, while London City Airport was crowned the best with waiting times of just 12 minutes. Now, I think there's probably a reason for that. They don't have many passengers, do they? But who am I to say? Let us know your thoughts. Do you have an airport that you think is good or bad at airport queues?